Okay, you guys, let's do this. It's going to be so professional. Like, so professional. Here we go. Welcome to the Live Support Podcast with your hosts, Michele and June Colson, a couple of clean comedians who support each other and others through comedy's wacky and winding roads. I hope you're ready. Get set. Let's go. Since podcasts have a catchy tune, we wrote this song for Michele and June. Clean comedians are best friends too. Oh, it's so good. And you never know what they'll say or do. Here we go, sing with me on Live Support, with Michele, who's really short. We'll have a ball, with June, who's really tall. They have fun, interviewing comedians on Live Support, with Michele, who's really short. Now it's time to start Live Support.
The Live Support Podcast is brought to you by the Hot Breath Comedy Network.
Wow, give yourself a round of applause. Woo! That was magic. Welcome to the award-winning Laugh Support Podcast. I'm your host, June Bug Colson, here with Michele with one L, Trisha, and Morgan's sister, Rhonda Colson, Corey's friend. Don't call me Shelly, Michele Van Dusen. Michele, you bright, shining, happy friend of mine. How are we doing today?
I am extremely pleasant today. I'm very shiny, and I don't know why. The lighting, there's no difference today. Well, except, you know what? Yesterday we had a lot of cloud cover. And so if it's sunnier in here, I'm just thinking I shouldn't go outside.
Yeah, is that right? So Michele, we've had a couple wardrobe changes for you today, and it's not a Halloween episode, so we can't go ghostly white the way that you were before. So it's okay. We got it. We're together. We're here for episode 2 of season 5. So that's super exciting. And today we're going to talk about getting out of our comfort zones. So yeah, you were definitely not in your comfort zone with the lighting that you had on you just a little bit ago. But we talked about in comedy, a lot of times we're out of our comfort zone. So I asked you this morning if you could think about maybe a show or something that you've done in comedy that took you out of your comfort zone. So did anything come to mind that you could talk about today?
All of them, all the shows, every single one of them. Well, I really started thinking about, like what's the difference between being out of your comfort zone? Okay. Did you hear that?
That's Jesus calling. You're glowing so bright that he had to put on sunglasses. He's like, Michele, you got to tone it down there. It's too much. You're distracting.
For whatever reason, my printer just turned on.
Oh, okay.
Apparently it makes a loud noise. I'm going to have to figure out I'm going to ask my kid to, unless he's wanting to print something. That was so weird.
Yes. A few technical difficulties today. Look, Reggie, now you disturbed Reggie. You woke up my dog. He was doing good. He was behaving in the background, but now he needs attention. All right. So out of your comfort zone. We need to get in the zone today. We can't even get in the zone to get out of the zone for the comfort zone. So
yes. Okay. So I thought about it. Just first, when I first started out doing comedy, that was not in my comfort zone at all. Talking, totally in my comfort zone. Talking to people from a stage about things that I wrote that I thought might be funny, not in my comfort zone.
Right.
Put me in a grocery store in a line, I'll chatter the whole time and everybody will be laughing. But then now take that and put it on stage. Now everybody's looking. So that was really tough at the very beginning, 20 years ago or whatever it was. And, it really hasn't changed. Like that whole anxiety, uncomfortable, and then, so through the years, I've had to adjust the energy and the excitement and all that adrenaline. I've had to, train my brain to go, okay, no, this is going to be good. This is, and this is a good uncomfort, because and when you hear the word stress, what do you think?
Well, you think negative, like that's a negative thing. Stress is a negative emotion.
But stress is also positive. There's a positive and a negative to stress. If you're exercising, you want to stress your muscles so that way you can grow.
Mhm.
You don't want to, but at the same time, you don't want to have a high stress job and then have to take heart medication. You know what I mean? So
Right, right.
stress is good and it's
Mhm.
bad. Sometimes stress is, it helps you stretch, it helps you grow. Anyway, so
Well, and that's why you hear people say manage your stress, not get rid of all stress. It's impossible. We live in a stressful world, and so you can't get rid of all of it, but you have to figure out a way to manage that stress where it's not damaging.
yeah, yeah. But you also have to identify what kind of stress it is. So like when I first started and I had like stage fright, okay, what am I really afraid of? And then you have to break it down
Mm.
and kind of just evaluate and evaluate and evaluate. And so for the longest time, for years, I would just do my show and then leave. I couldn't handle anyone complimenting whether it was good, and I couldn't handle anyone criticizing if it was bad.
Mm. Yeah.
So it took me a long time to grow as a comedian. I'm very thankful to my friend Susan Dale because she w- she was like, "This is what I'm doing. I'm going for it." And I just kind of like held on to her coattails and just kind of hung out, and just did. She took me everywhere. But one of the best things that happened is she set up a room, a comedy room, and made me the host. So I hosted every single show, and it was like, 6 shows a week,
Hmm.
and for 3 months. And I really was able to, learn crowd interaction and how to be
Yeah.
comfortable and how to introduce someone. Like it was just all those things. And it just kind of,
Yeah.
how you just finally get that right pair of shoes and you've kind of worked them, now they're comfortable,
Yeah.
like so that kind of thing. Um, but no, okay, so now lately I'm like, well, how does someone who's just starting out, who's way more self-aware than I ever was, how do they um, step out of their comfort zone? So the first thing is you need to set small, achievable goals. So that would be like, something that's attainable. So like the first thing, people always say, well, just make your bed in the morning. Okay, I've done something, check. But
Right.
for
Right.
comedy, a small achievable goal is first find out what you think is funny. What
Mm.
start making yourself lists,
Yeah. Yeah.
what's hard, what's easy, and just start writing those kind of things out. And um, Google, look up, find out where an open mic is happening in your area
Yeah.
and make that your first step. Okay,
Hmm.
I've got these jokes and yeah.
Well, thinking about open mics, so when you said small attainable goal, I think a lot of times people going to an open mic who are just starting out, if it's like, everybody gets 4 minutes, let's say
Mhm.
you're getting 4 minutes, a new open mic person might think, oh, I have to do 4 whole minutes. And you
Yeah.
don't. You
No.
can actually yield that time back to the room to the next person. It may be that, like, this is my first time at an open mic and
I
I'm
have
just
few
going to go
jokes.
for it. And you do 2 minutes, right? So that's a
Yeah.
small attainable goal, like writing 2 minutes worth of material, not a half an hour, not 45 minutes. And also understanding, and you can even run that by the host when you come in and go, hey, I've only got 2 minutes. Is that okay? I don't know that any host is going to be like, no, we want you to just fill 2 more minutes with nothing, just ramble for 2 extra minutes so that you fill the four. No, like the small
Yeah.
attainable goal, get out of your comfort zone, do that open mic for the first time, and don't feel like you have to have 45 minutes. If you've got a minute and a half, 2 minutes,
Yeah.
do those 2 minutes. And trust me,
Yeah.
if you only have 2 minutes, um, it's probably going to feel like to you and to the audience
An
like you
hour.
did a full 4 minutes because you're awkward and you're uncomfortable and like, but you get it, you rip that band-aid off
Yeah.
with something small and not overwhelm yourself with a big amount of time. But I think a lot of open micers, like new open micers, don't realize that they don't have to fill the whole, because they'll be like, oh, I've seen that before, where they're like, oh gosh, I still have let's see, I got 2 more minutes. No, just end with your 2 minutes. That's good enough.
Yeah. And that's also a really important thing is, you you want to end on a high note. you know,
If you can.
you want to end with a laugh,
Yeah, if you can.
you know, or a groan, either way. You know, you don't want to just go like, okay, and then like empty space. You don't want to
Mhm.
leave on empty space. That's never, you know, because it's it's a definite thing. But I do like that concept because I have done that a lot on open mics because like I just have a couple of jokes. I just want to see if they're gonna flow or fit. And you know, they go over the rules when you get at a club and they're like, okay, you know, no swearing, no cussing, blah 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 blah. You have 4 minutes. If you see the light, wrap it up. If you see it, get off the stage. Like there's just all these, you know, things you never want to go over.
Right.
That's the worst. You don't want to go over. You want to make sure that you stay within those minutes. But yeah, and if it's your first time, it's okay. Like you said,
Mhm.
just be done. And I love that. And people are always they appreciate your honesty, and that's really where it's at on
Mhm.
stage, being honest. So, um, but yeah, that's a small achievable goal. So, like if you've been doing comedy for a while, your small achievable goal might be getting a tour set up. You know, where you have, you know, this city and then this one, and just planning out, you know,
Mhm.
your calendar kind of a thing. Um, Now my second like actual step to get you out of your comfort zone is you need to practice on a regular basis. You need
Mhm.
to rehearse, you need to practice, you need to, you know, perform it for your family, perform it in front of a mirror. Actually, I don't think doing it in front of a mirror is actually great because then what happens is you actually are now staring at yourself and then
Yeah.
going, oh, well, and then trying, and then it becomes a robotic kind of a thing because now you're practicing, you know, oh, I didn't like how that looked. Oh, so just don't.
No, and I
Prac-
think too, like there are a lot of comedians who truly have ADHD. And you can't, like, I can't do that. I can't look at myself in the mirror. Like, I can't even when we're doing the podcast, I can't look at myself in the camera.
Yeah.
Like, I'm distracted by my own face. I'm distracted by like the wrinkle, my hair. I mean, I'll drift. I'll just go into a different place. And so I think for some people, just being self aware of what does distract you when you're trying to practice. I personally, I have a spoon. I have a little tiny miniature ladle, and I have my ladle, and I have to walk. I can't just sit and think about it. Like I've got to be on the move, and I have to do the motions, but I can't watch myself do it. It's like way too much. Yeah, you have a real microphone, but that's not a ladle. I get it, Michelle. You have the real equipment. I'm walking around with kitchen utensils, but
I'm just
it
saying
works for me.
at this point, you should have a real microphone for the weight of it, you know, for the weight and like now that is one thing. Like if you are looking in the mirror, you do need to at least see what your outfit looks like and how the lighting is.
No, that's true. That's true. But that's just before. That's before you go on stage. I try to find some
Yeah.
place to check.
Water
You know.
bottles. Water bottles are great too, you know, to practice.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you said so when you first started comedy, that was getting out of your comfort zone. For
Yeah.
me, absolutely the same thing. Like I think about the first time that I did 5 minutes, I drove 2.5 hours to do 5 minutes. And it was just a little bitty event. It was a friend of ours that's a pastor, and it was his birthday, and he was like, hey, any of the comics who want to come and just do a little bit of time. And I was like, oh wow, you know, I wonder if he'll let me do that. And it was basically comedians performing for comedians. And
Yeah.
I remember like all the way 2.5 hours. My husband drove me. I was in the passenger seat. He was not allowed to talk to me. And I was just practicing over and over and over again that 5 minutes at 5 minutes at 5 minutes, just over and over and over and over and over again. And that was definitely getting out of my comfort zone. Not only like performing 5 minutes, but knowing it was going to be you know, like a bunch of comedians that were going to be watching me. Um, but when you do get out of your comfort zone and you survive that, you didn't die,
If
nobody stole your birthday, then it makes you a little more bold for the next time that
yeah.
you do it. But you're right, it's in the beginning for sure. It's getting out of your comfort zone 100%, but I don't think that ever ends. I think that comedy can be in so many different places and so many different environments that it's a running theme in comedy. is constantly being in a position where you got to be out of your comfort zone. Listen, you
Yeah.
can hear Reggie's. Reggie can't find a comfort zone. He's just cruising around everywhere. Go
Do
lay
you need
down.
to
Go lay down.
find a comfort zone,
Blessings.
old man? Well, yeah, but the thing too about like if you're practicing on a regular basis, then you end up having more confidence when you go up there. Then you're not standing there going, "Hey, what was my next line? Hang on.
Yeah, yeah.
Ah, I knew I wrote this down. Yeah, and I'll just go to the next thing. It's like, yeah, as
Yeah.
an audience member, and then as a comedian, you're like, oh. So if you practice it, and one of the ways, like I know you're an actress, one of the ways I used to memorize scripts and things is I would take the content, not necessarily memorize word for word, but take the
Right.
emotion, take the meaning, what's happening in the script.
Yeah.
And, as long as I have the same emphasis and then it was easier then to then pick up the words kind of a thing. And so if you're practicing your set, how do you memorize, your set? Like, because especially when you like get a new order, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, that didn't work there. How do you go about picking those transitional
Mm,
statements? That comes from, you got to practice those.
yeah. Yeah. Mine in the beginning for sure was all about transitions, which was a good thing. I was really good about finding the transitional points between materials to take me from literally I would write a joke that would bridge things together.
Hmm.
So I have a joke about tasing my kids, and then used to it transitioned into my material about working at an elementary school. So I wrote a joke about like tasing my kids, and then then the transition was, it's fine, I don't actually own a taser anymore, even though it would come in handy where I used to work, and I would pause at an elementary school. Right. So the joke was I had a taser at an elementary school, and it would get like half the room would laugh and half the room would tense up. And so the tag basically was, okay, if you didn't laugh, you have never walked into a classroom with 32 sugared up kindergartners.
Hmm.
Right.
Then you put it
So
in perspective.
I took where I was with the kids and tasing. Okay, now how can I write a joke about the taser that applies to the next content that I'm doing? So the next content was in elementary school. Okay, so
Mm,
a taser would be out of place at an elementary school. So I would have these transitions that took me from that joke to this joke.
yeah.
So that was always really easy for me to write, was the transitions between the two. But the problem with that is then I had a hard time moving parts, going,
Mm,
oh, well, I'll take that joke and I'll put it at the end here, and then I'll move that over there because that might actually be a better joke to, get the audience attention. Like I might
yeah.
connect better with that joke. Well, the problem is, well, but that comes after because of that bridge joke. And so I would get myself kind of in this, which was great because I didn't have trouble remembering my set when I would go on, because I would know and sometimes it would be a hand motion, where it was like something about being big, and then my next jokes were about how big my kids were, and I
Hmm.
already like did this hand motion, which was what triggers the brain to go, oh, we're big now, it's to this joke, which is good if you are at the point where you've got an hour of perfect A material
Hmm.
that when I get hired to do whatever job as the headliner, this is how I do that set. This is my set, right? And this is how I
Yeah.
do it. But for me, I would be out of my comfort zone if I had to move my parts around, because I had such defined transitional points between this bit and that bit. So it was a blessing and it was a curse. Now I've learned to play with it more and
Hmm.
be able to switch things around. So I no longer, right now, most of the time, the taser doesn't take me to the kid material. It takes me to tasing
Being
my
arrested.
husband.
Oh, okay.
What'd you say? What was
Being arrested.
Yes, it takes me to to the
Mm.
penitentiary. It takes me back to
That's
jail
cute.
for tasing people. No. So now I figured out, oh, okay, well, I do the same thing. I write a transitional joke between the taser now and not elementary school, but the taser and doing a yard project with my husband,
Mm,
and how, like, I don't actually own a taser anymore. My husband took it, not because he's afraid I'll tase them, because I was talking about the children, but
yeah.
because he knows I will tase him. Right. And it leads me into
Yeah.
another point. But yeah, getting out of your comfort zone too is being willing to move some pieces around or to pull a joke out and pop in a new one.
Yeah. Which is that's a whole nother um yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Because
Yeah.
like when you're first starting out, you're like, okay, I gotta do this, this,
Yeah.
this, this, this. And if any of that gets out of order, then you're like, oh, that was a horrible show. Like you just start marking it down as the worst night ever. I can't believe I bombed. And other people are like, no, actually it was good.
They didn't even
But
notice. Yeah. They don't even
yeah,
notice.
they had no idea. And
No.
that's the thing too, is like, when you're playing music, like, because I used to play the cello and I was in orchestras and things like that. And so when you're playing, people can tell when you hit the wrong note.
Yeah.
Like, oh, something was
Yeah.
off. But when you're doing comedy and you're doing material that you've written, nobody knows. Nobody knows
Yeah.
if you were supposed to go off on that rabbit trail, or if you were supposed, as long as they keep getting punchlines and they keep getting an opportunity to laugh, and they get to laugh and they get to laugh and nobody knows.
Yeah.
Nobody has no
Yeah.
idea. So we need to give ourselves a little grace on some stuff, just anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just practice.
Mhm.
Now, did you grow up, your family and teachers and always say, oh, practice makes perfect? They ever do that?
Yes, that was the phrase. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah. That is such a lie. That is
Not in
such a lie.
comedy.
Practice does not make perfection. And I think that's why I think my whole generation, you know, hasn't done great. No, practice makes progress.
Mhm.
And that's the whole thing about, doing comedy. You just want to continue to progress and get better and better and better. We can't get perfect. I've never seen a perfect set. Have you?
I've seen some that I'm like, that was nearly perfect. Yes. I've seen some pretty yeah, there's some
Yeah.
powerhouse comedians. I mean, I think about it like Nate Bargatze, one of his last specials,
Hmm.
beginning, middle, and end. It was just, it was ridiculous. But that is somebody who has been at this game for a long time.
Hmm.
Also, I believe just has a gift from God, that this person is just, all he was already just kind of mind created
Yeah.
for this industry, and then just the work ethic and the grace of God on him. So yeah, I've seen a few that I'm like, yeah, that's pretty darn close to a perfect set. But for the most part, even some of the best sets I've seen, somebody will stumble on a word, or they'll lose their place, or whatever, and they still rock the house. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, you
Excuse
like
me.
Nate's special, fantastic. But if his type of comedy isn't what you enjoy, then you're like,
Yeah.
like, because, and that's the beautiful thing. There's so many different comedians with different points of view, with different styles and all of that. So you can have, that's why I love doing ensemble, shows where you
Yeah.
have more than one comedian, because then if you didn't like the one's style, don't don't worry, there's gonna be another comedian come up
Right.
next,
Yeah.
and so it's the whole show.
Yeah.
And I am not knocking Nate Bargatze. Okay, just I want
Oh, I know
everybody
you're
to
not.
know that.
No, that didn't sound at all like you were
Okay.
knocking him at all. But
Yeah,
no,
okay.
you're right. Like, different people, I remember the first special I watched of his. At first, I was kind of like, because he's so slow paced and whatever. And I was just kind of like, well, I don't know if he's that funny. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting on my couch on the back patio, and I can't move. I'm like just intrigued, and then I'm fully entertained by the end of it, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I
Yeah.
think you're right too. Even in the ensembles, even in doing, that's such a big word, an ensemble. When you're doing comedy with other people, that can take you out of your comfort zone too, because you could be like, oh my gosh. So this last show that I did was with Dan Whitehurst
Hmm.
and Johnny W.
Oh, wow.
And you know, Dan Whitehurst is he tours with Killer Bees. He's been at it forever. He's a retired Nashville police officer. He was voted America's funniest cop. He's great at what he does. Johnny
Nice.
W, I've never seen him not just have an excellent show, you know. And then there's me. And you can get in your head and be uncomfortable when you're working with people that are that experienced and talented,
Mhm.
because I'm still, you know, I still feel like I'm a newbie in the game, and I'm still figuring things out, still developing material. I'm still throwing a lot of new stuff out there that hits and misses, you know. So I have what I feel like good uh sets, but I don't have a whole lot
Yeah.
of what I feel like, oh man, I just crushed that, because I'm still throwing new stuff out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, you can be intimidated and be out of your comfort zone because you're working with people like that. But one of the things I told one of my friends, I'm like, you know, Johnny W, he's speaking of Nate, I mean, he's part of that whole group. Um, I've had a really good set in front of Johnny before, and I've had a mediocre set in front of him.
Mhm.
And because I had a good set in front of Johnny didn't mean that this person, he doesn't control the entire comedy industry. He, you know, it wasn't like, oh, you had a good set in front of comedian A, so now my career is going to be launched and everybody's going to love me and I'm going to get 1,000 jobs, right? You can like get in your head about that. Or, oh no, this guy who works with Nate Bargatze just saw me have a mediocre set. He thinks I'm horrible. I'll never work again. Like, a lot of times we make ourselves uncomfortable for absolutely no reason. Johnny is a really good comedian and a really great guy. But like the way we believe is that God opens and closes doors anyway. So we don't have
Yeah.
to fret over man's opinion of a specific comedy set today. Now, I mean, I've
Yeah.
had moments where I've like not done well in front of a veteran and it stings a little bit more, but I also think that if anything, those are the folks who are going to get it. They still get it. People, I remember being with Johnny Bonehampton, Brian Bates. I feel like somebody else was sitting at the table after a Zany show, and Bone
Mhm.
had invited me to sit down with these guys. This was before 2020.
Yeah.
And I remember Johnny talking about bombing like the week before. And he was saying that he got hired, if I remember correctly, he got hired by some corporation, and it was like a riverboat cruise or something. And they had him on a stage in the middle of like the dining hall, and everyone completely ignored him. And just like, but he was like, you know, they paid really good money to ignore me. And that was it. And I remember thinking, well, I'm glad I heard that from somebody like a veteran in this, that they still have moments where it's not the
Yeah.
perfect show. Jeff Allen, I remember sitting at his table a couple years into being in his writing group, and he came in and he was like, "Oh my gosh, you know, this weekend, whatever happened?" And this was the people they booked him in front of, and it was not his audience. And he was like, "That, you know, I haven't experienced that in a long time." But and I was thinking, this guy's been doing it nearly 30 years, and he still has to
Yeah.
get out of his comfort zone, and still every once in a while has a show that's like, "Oh my gosh, what just happened?" You know?
Yeah. That now, and for our listeners, I want you to define veteran, because I know you're talking about a veteran comedian. What does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
because is that 5 years in comedy? Is that, doing comedy as a hobby? Like, what define what you mean by
Yeah, I
veteran?
mean, I don't know what other people would consider a veteran in comedy, but I would think if somebody's been doing this over 10 years, 10 to 15 years.
Mhm.
And it's their full-time gig, not like they've dabbled in it or they do a show here and there. But if it's somebody who's been at this full
Mm.
time, this is their career. This is what they've, dedicated at least their career life on
Yeah.
for, over 10 years. I think that's a veteran in
Yeah.
comedy. And for sure, anybody who's been at it 20 years or longer, and this has been their job, their life for over 20 years, that's a veteran for sure. So that's just my personal definition of it. I don't know what, obviously, you're referring to, like, people will be like veteran, like military, but you can call someone a veteran in the fire service, a veteran, and that's just somebody who has served for a long time. These are the people
Yeah.
who have been around, been there, done that, and are knowledgeable about whatever industry they're in.
Yeah, because like if if you go with a veteran, oh, you were in the service, yeah, I was the cook, you know what I
Yes,
mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
or I'm the commander, you know what I mean. Like there's a huge gap
There's a
there.
difference, yes, but that's in any industry, not just comedy. There's veterans in lots of different industries,
Yeah,
but yeah, that's what we're referring to
yeah. So
when we
full
say that.
time, longer
Yeah,
than
yeah.
10 years. That's really good. Like that's good to know because that'll define and clarify some things.
Mm,
So we're not talking about someone that just some internet pop-up star that just started,
yes,
because they've got 15 million followers or whatever.
right,
No, this is someone that has paid their dues, that has gone on those horrible road gigs.
yeah,
So I do love that what you said about Johnny W, where well, they just paid a lot of money to ignore me. And the thing is he could have very well you know spoke about that show in a different manner because it was on a riverboat, right? So he'd be like, yeah, I had that crowd rocking, because
yes,
boats
yes,
rock.
yes.
Okay.
I get Michelle. No, no, Michelle. No, not this season,
No.
Michelle.
Okay. Yeah. You were about to say something.
No, no, no. So, like,
Oh,
okay, so you gave us two tips about getting. How many tips do you have? We're into
just
this
three.
32
Just
minutes. Okay, so let's
three.
get to tip number three.
Okay. So the third one is you got to practice self-assessment. You have to identify your areas of how you can grow, and acknowledge that kind of progress kind of stuff. And then at the same time, because you do a set and then you have to evaluate without emotion. See, I think that's one thing that has held me up for the longest time because
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, that was a horrible show. And then I won't even touch it. I won't look at it, won't deal with it because I didn't feel good about it. I didn't,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's no, you have to evaluate. That's why you're supposed to you should record, even if it's just, on your phone or
Uh
whatever,
huh.
record every set so that you can go back and you can listen to how your jokes flowed, if the audience is laughing, if they're not laughing, okay, and then back it up. Okay, why didn't they laugh there? You have to
Right.
evaluate. You have to assess each set
Hmm.
every time so you can get better.
Yes.
And if you don't do that, you will spin your wheels and you will continue to make comedy a hobby. And then you'll get yourself a podcast and you'll get a co-host who's amazing. And
Stop, stop. We talked about this before, like, in just recently. So I had to get out of my comfort zone. I did
yeah,
two events in one day within a few hours of each other that were total opposites. Um,
yeah.
the first event was a women's 80s party, and I was full on in like an 80s costume with a side ponytail and blue eyeshadow, and like they were all
Mm.
dressed up. It was super fun. um and then I had to like get back to the hotel room, take a shower, wash all the Aquanet out of my hair and the blue eyeshadow off, and get ready for a theater show that night. And I had to be out of my comfort zone, and I was
Yeah.
switching up material. So as I was talking about, I have these transitions and have a certain flow of what I like to do if I'm doing 30 minutes and what I like to do if I'm doing 15. And so I was
Yeah.
having to kind of, because the women in the 80s party were actually going to be back at that theater that night for the
Hmm.
show. So I didn't want to repeat a lot of material. I wanted to make sure that it was very individual to each of the shows. And so I was very much out of my comfort zone. I was having to try to figure a lot of things out. This theater show that night, I have video recording of it. The 80s party, I forgot my tripod, so I just have audio recording, which makes me very sad. It was so much fun. But so my husband recorded it. And it was one of those where it was like, I didn't feel like I crushed, I felt like
Mhm.
it was good. And I was, bouncing between the 80s party and back over. And it was a lot. It was a lot in one day.
Yeah.
And so that night, I switched up my set a little bit. I threw in a couple new things I hadn't done before. And it's just to keep it fresh for both audiences. And afterwards, my husband was like, "Hey, I've got it. I've got it video. I've got the video. Do you want to see it? You want me to send it to you?" And I was like, "Yeah, not today." And he goes, "All right, if you're going to beat yourself up, I'm just not sending it to you." And I go, "No, no, no, no," because he knew that I felt like it was
Mhm.
okay. It wasn't great. I
Yeah.
wasn't like feeling. But I wasn't. I didn't feel like I bombed or it was horrible. It just wasn't as good as I wish it could be. And
Yeah.
so he goes, "Well, what's your purpose in the video?" And I said, "Yeah, the purpose in the video is to evaluate and get better at what I do, which is why I wait." And we've talked about this before. I don't watch the video until the emotions are no longer there, until
Yeah.
I'm like either over the high that I had, because if I felt really good about it, then I don't want to watch the video and be like, "Oh no.
Mhm.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought I had a good
Yeah.
set and that was not that good." Or the opposite, where if I felt like I had a bad set, I don't want to watch it while I still feel that way, just to like poke the wound, right? Like,
Yeah.
no, let's calm down until I'm not sad about it anymore. And then I'll watch it. But the whole point of it is to evaluate yourself. If you're going to
Mhm.
beat yourself up or criticize yourself, then don't watch the
Yeah.
video. Don't
Yeah.
record yourself if that's what you're going to do. It's supposed to be a tool. It's not supposed to be something that
Not a torture.
right, that tortures you. You're right.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is like if you're following someone who just crushed it and the audience is like, "Yeah," and then you're already going in like, "Oh, mine's not going to be as good as that." Then you're
Oh
not
yeah.
giving the audience what they need. Um and you're doing yourself a disservice. And then, because if you stay in your head like that. So I love the fact that you are like, "No, no, let me wait until my adrenaline has adjusted here. Wait till my
Yeah, yeah.
emotional, um changes." Because like that's the thing, like I think next time that we get together and do another set here, I think we should talk about how do you manage your adrenaline. How do you manage, because you just did two shows back to back, and how do you keep your energy for both? How do you like that? That's a
Mm,
lot of stuff that happened in that set. And then also doing two shows a night, like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because a lot
I
of
think like
comedians.
as far as a comedy club goes, like doing two shows a night, that's you're doing the same set. It's a whole different crowd. You can kind of bounce from one to the other, maybe play a little bit in between.
Yeah.
Um, this was just a
Mhm.
whole different thing to
Yeah.
do, like 90, it was close to 90 women. And then those women were coming back that night, and then 400 and something, with people that night, and doing two totally different sets, two totally different vibes. I
Yeah.
was doing crowd work at the first one, and sing-alongs and dancing with the little girls that were there dressed in their little 80s outfits, and like that was a whole different thing to
Yeah.
be on like that for that, and then come back and produce the evening show, so
Hmm.
responsible for everybody and
Yeah.
everything.
So
And
you
doing the
basically
set, like
had
it was a lot in one
three. Yeah, you had like three different hats on. You had
day. Yes.
performer, and then you had um the manager, and then you had another performance. Like it
Yeah.
was three different. Yeah, so like
But
that's
that's why we're talking about getting out of your comfort zone. It wasn't easy, but it ended up being a lot of fun.
hmm
Um and it pushed me. It pushed me to have to write new stuff.
yeah.
And it pushed me to be out of my comfort zone, and at the end of the night it's like I was exhausted, but like yeah, We did it, man.
Yeah.
Got through
And
it. We did it.
see, and what's great is because it was successful. Now you can that gets marked in your brain and in you that that was successful. I can do this next thing, and it put it pushes you to the next. And I love that you said it pushed you to write new stuff. It pushed you to
Yeah.
do more, and I think that's a big thing too. Is just staying in a comfort area. I've done this for
Yeah.
20 years. I'm going to keep doing it this way for 20 years. I'm never going to change. This is how we're going to do
Yeah.
what we do. And I mean, that's probably why I still have a set of encyclopedia books. Nobody uses those anymore.
Michelle, why do you have encyclopedias? I don't know, man. That's gonna be it's gonna be classic. It's gonna be on a shelf somewhere. It's gonna be antique, decor in someone's house one day. Is
Yeah,
the
well, that's how people are using it, as
yes.
antique things, as door stoppers, things like that. But
Yes.
I'm just saying, like, it's good to get out of your comfort zone so we
Yeah.
go to the next thing.
Well, it keeps it fresh. That's what we talked about last episode, is doing something different.
Yeah.
It keeps it fresh and it keeps it a little more exciting. It's like, you're not eating the same meal every single night. You get different flavors in your life. You're doing different material,
Yeah.
and you're having a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
so let's get to the tip of the day, unless you have
Okay.
another. Was that
No,
okay? So
we're
let's get to
good.
the tip of the day, because we have something we want to talk about as we close out the episode. A friend we want to talk about. So for me, the tip of the day just goes along with what we're talking about. So, or the tip of the week. It's once a week. Surround yourself. Surround yourself. Okay. If you want to get out of your comfort zone, surround yourself with risk takers. Because if you are
Ooh.
not around people who are willing to get out of their comfort zone and step out and take a risk, then you are likely not going to be willing to do that. The show that I just recently did in South Carolina with Chris Roop, the adoption fundraising show, our friend Darren Streblo was on the show. I met a couple new guys that were on the show as well. Paul Snyder, I definitely would love to have him on the show. Anyway, so I was with some people that I didn't know, but what happened is a couple of the guys had actually done this show. It's 7 years running. So they were like, oh, I got to do all new stuff because they've heard my stuff before.
Mhm.
So everybody in the green room basically was doing something new.
Mm.
And I remember like thinking I was just going to do my regular set that I normally do for a 15-minute spot or whatever. But I had a couple things I wanted to try. And in the car, my husband goes, "What are you, chicken? What are you, chicken? You're
Oh.
not going to try something new?" And I tell people he Marty McFly'd me. That's what that is. When someone calls you chicken, Marty McFly in Back to the Future, you didn't call him chicken. He's going to do it. So he Marty McFlies me, and I'm like, okay, fine. So I stepped out of my comfort zone because my husband challenged me, and because I was surrounded by some dudes who are about to jump out and take some risk, and everybody. So the next night we all did the same show together, minus one of the comics who wasn't able to come. The next night we all did the same thing. And it was a unique room. It was one of those rooms where, like, if you jumped off the stage and tickled people, you still couldn't get them to laugh out loud. Like, they were
Oh.
very sweet, polite, but that was it. Like, they just kind of smiled and nodded at all the comedians. Like, you've been there, you've done a show like that. And so anyway, it made it even more fun because it's like, what do you got to lose? And so the headliner, he dropped a couple things out there that didn't go very far. And as comics, we're in the wing cracking up laughing, and he like turns and acknowledges that we're the only ones who laughed because it didn't work, right? But it made me more bold because I was around people who are like, yeah, I'm going to try this new, that new, and them being honest in the green room that they were a little anxious about it. They're like, oh, I hope I can remember. And literally that was what we prayed. Like Chris prayed over the comics, and he was like, just give us clear minds, let us be bold, let us have fun trying new things. And
Yeah.
it made it such a fun experience. Even the show that, like, it felt like they just stared at me like I was a zoo creature. Like they were just looking through the bars and hoping like I didn't reach out and grab them or something. it made it more fun because we stepped out of our comfort zone, and everybody on that second night show, everyone did something new. And that was really fun.
Wow. That's when you first said surround yourself with risk takers.
Yes.
I was like, is this going to be good risks or bad risks?
Well, sometimes you find out that wasn't the best risk to take, but you did it. You jumped out there. So no, surround yourself in comedy with comedians who are willing to step out, do something different, take a
Yeah.
risk, and have some fun.
I
Okay,
love
so
that.
speaking of comedians, so we wanted today to make sure before we close out the episode that we mention our friend Dave Ebert. So Dave Ebert recently passed away while we were in our off season. And Dave was he was a guest on our show season 1, episode 27.
Yeah.
Dave was on, aka Big Boy Buddy Love. I think that was
Yeah.
his wrestler name. And Dave he was a friend to our podcast. He did a lot of the Maurice Brown shows, which Michele and I have been on many of his broadcast. And I had a chance. I think you did too. The Gifts of Glory podcast. Michele, were you on his podcast?
I never.
You weren't on that.
I don't think so. If we did, it was together. I know I didn't do it.
Oh, that's right. We did. No, we actually did do one. So I did an episode with him, and then it feels like maybe a year later, we did a live episode with him.
Yeah.
You and I both did. Yeah, we did. We did. So Dave definitely used his comedy to just touch the lives and hearts of so many people. Michele, can you tell us a little bit more about what he did ministry wise?
Well, he had an improv group, and he would minister to women and help them overcome some of their traumas and stuff through their improv group and through their improv ministry. And it was fantastic. And this is definitely a man that, is gone way too soon, and it's just, it's sad. And I'm glad that we're mentioning him, because I would be remiss if we didn't just honor him. So, yeah. So
Absolutely. I remember him saying, see, Dave was a big guy, obviously did wrestling. He was a wrestler. He was a really big dude. And I remember on the podcast when he was talking with us, or I was talking to him on his podcast, talked about just how comedy broke down walls, like you said, for women who had suffered trauma, and especially trauma at the hands of men. And he was a gentle giant. And it was able to maybe change their perspective on that. Not every man in the world was like the ones who had hurt them, that there were good people like Dave on this planet. He said a lot of them had lost their childhood to this trauma, so they never got to play and pretend and, think outside of the box and just let loose and have fun. And so many times they would come in and they wouldn't quite know what to do. And then, by the end of his program, they're laughing, they're using their imagination, and I think it felt like they gained a little bit of their childhood back, is what I felt like.
And self-respect.
Yeah, was just one of the impressions. And then also, like with improv, a lot of people who are really shy will take improv classes. It helps them just kind of think on their feet, get more comfortable interacting with people. So, and his wisdom, when I talked about him being on the podcast with Maurice Brown in the Bible study, and I always loved when I was on the lineup and Dave was on the show, because there were a few people like yourself, Dave, that I always felt like, man, these are people who really know the Word of God, who are bold, who are wise in the Word, and who love the Lord and are uncompromised in the way that they approach their faith. And so he wasn't afraid to have hard conversations. And I totally loved and respected that about him. So we just ask our listeners to, be in prayer for his wife, Bobby, their family, all the people who are sad by the loss of Dave on this planet. But we know, as believers, we know that, man, he is in a beautiful place, and I know he wouldn't return for anything, and we are only going to miss him for a little while, and one day we will get to share eternity with
Yeah.
our friend Dave. So
Yeah.
again, we
Yeah.
just wanted to mention that before we close out. Yeah, just pray
Okay.
for his family
So
and his friends.
yeah, definitely keep lifting them up. I'm just gonna say this, and I know he would love this,
Yes.
uh, because he was a wrestler. What lights up a wrestling ring?
What, Michelle?
A match. And Dave.
And Dave. And
And
Dave.
Dave. And Dave.
What a great way. I'm not even going to be mad at your cheesy joke today because so there was, yeah, for our listeners there, if you watch us on YouTube, you'll be able to see a picture of our friend Dave at the end. What a great joke to
Yeah.
end it with. I can't, yeah, big boy, buddy love, Dave Ebert. We just thank God for people like Dave. And yeah, so that's a great way to end the podcast. Friends, if you are listening to us, know that you can watch this podcast on YouTube. Yeah, definitely please follow us on Facebook and on Instagram at the Life Support Podcast. And if you want to email us, if you have any guest suggestions, any questions or topics, thelaughsup@gmail.com, thelaughsup@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow my amazing friend Michele with one L. You can find Michele at Michelle's Comedy on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And her website is michellevandusen.org. And then as for me, everything is Junebug Comedy, junebugcomedy.com. And you can find me at Junebug Comedy on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and wherever else. And also, hey, check me out. I'm on the platform now, Heroes Off Duty. You can find me on their YouTube and all of that. I'm getting to make some content as a firefighter's wife for their platform. So it's called Heroes Off Duty. So check us out on there. All right. So that's going to be it for this episode of the Life Support Podcast. Get out there, get out of your comfort zone, have some fun. And remember that Jesus and Junebug loves you. Michele, tell them goodbye.
Goodbye. Thanks for tuning in. See ya.